Good afternoon. My name is Joyce Hunter, and I am the Infrastructure Critical, the Institute for Critical Infrastructure Technology Executive Director. And today's briefing is titled SOC Operations. I want to extend a special welcome to our ICIT members and thank them for their support. I also want to thank our sponsor, Devo, for partnering with us on today's briefing as our technology expert. As a nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank, partners like Devo are crucial to keeping our briefings freely available, and we are very grateful for their support. Today's session is Optimizing SOC Operations. Security operations centers are the backbone of the cybersecurity industry, providing defense, mitigation, and incident response against risks and attacks. However, SOCs are often criticized as ineffective, and one of the most frequently asked questions about SOC performance is how to measure SOC effectiveness. While meantime to resolution is the standard measure of effectiveness. This high-level measurement does not address the underlying optimization and performance improvement opportunities. SOC teams lack sight of visibility to attack surfaces, analyst burnout and turnover, and lack of budget for technology enhancements as a rationale for low performance. Effective SOC performance is a crucial factor for cybersecurity success in a rapidly evolving threat landscape. In this session, an expert panel will discuss recommendations to improve SOC performance such as automation, machine learning, strategic alignment, and analyst burnout. We hope that your SOC managers and analysts are here in the audience today to join us as we explore opportunities to optimize SOC performance. I would like to introduce our esteemed panel: Gunter Ullman, Chief Security Officer at Devo; Jennifer Saunders, Branch Chief for HHS; Dan LaGraff, Deputy CISO for the Department of Energy; Colonel Joshua Rockhill, Commander 688th Cyberspace Wing, U.S. Air Force. And I, again, am Joyce Hunter, your ICIT Executive Director. I'll turn it over to Gunter.
Thank you for the introduction, Joyce. So as we kick off this session, let's lay out a few interesting stats from a survey. So what I'm going to cover here briefly is the survey results from a commissioned report by Devo with via Ponemon. So this study covers about 101 federal SOC leaders in the United States, and this their feedback from an analysis. So where should we start? I think the first part here is about this overall misalignment of SOC objectives. So of the respondents, 76% felt that they were not fully aligned, that there was no full alignment between the business needs and SOC objectives. And when asked, how would you improve that alignment, 55% of those business leaders believe that there needed to be a more open line discussion with the SOC. Meanwhile, from the SOC leaders, they felt that they should be more accountable for how they support the business needs going forward. If that's sort of a misalignment between the SOC team, SOC organizations, and the business needs, I think another key result, a key finding of this report, really aligns with from the view from the trenches. And in particular, 41% of leaders do a good job communicating SOC strategy, and 46% of leaders listen to and understand the needs and priorities. I would reverse this and I would look at the other side. I would have thought and would have expected a well-functioning SOC team, SOC organizations to be well in the 90s and aiming for 100%. The fact that there is such a disparity between misalignments is worrying today. So what do security teams actually face? What are some of the operational challenges? Amongst the survey respondents, I think four key barriers were identified for SOC teams being successful. On one end of the spectrum, compliance with privacy and data protection requirements is holding back these SOC teams. Lack of analyst talent, lack of visibility into infrastructure, and at the top of the list, surprisingly, was the turf or silo issues between the IT and security teams. I think all of these components here, and if you like, these are the top barriers that were identified by those teams. Again, sort of re-stress the lack of synergy between the SOC operations teams and the business units themselves. I think a lot of the previous feedback of other studies outside of the federal space have identified compliance with privacy and protection, data protection issues as one of the leading barriers to success. So I think it's very interesting that there's quite a different view between the federal SOC leaders and commercial SOC leaders. So analysts are greatly affected by misalignment and operational challenges. What we found was that 75% of organizations indicate that working in a SOC is painful. Okay. I think that's a key word, painful. I hated that our industry has to use the word of working in a SOC is painful. But why is it painful? Nearly 60% of respondents found that there were just too many alerts to chase, if you like, the classic alert fatigue, which hints to poor technologies. There's a lack of visibility into the attack surface, which I think often translates to shadow IT and the distribution of IT services and systems across organizations. Information overload. I think that ties a little bit back to chasing too many alerts and too many things popping up red lights and bells and whistles. And the last one, increasing workload, which I think at almost 70% of respondents saying a painful, just increased workload, I think directly ties back to those previous three pains that SOC teams face. So what is the organizational impact? Well, the impact is very real. Okay, over half of the SOC leaders and the respondents felt that SOC is effectively hindered from being successful and providing true value to the organization. Top reasons were lack of timely remediation, too many tools, lack of skilled personnel. And the last point I'll make before we break into the session and for discussion really is that SOCs struggle to respond to threats quickly. Okay, so the mean time to respond is measured in weeks, months, and years. And again, from the respondents themselves, and these are SOC leaders, SOC operators, 76% of them felt that they are struggling to actually meet not only their business needs, but what they believe and what they they trust that what they believe their teams should be capable of supporting the business. So with that sort of, it feels almost depressing to provide some of these statistics in there, but it also doesn't surprise me for myself and the team here for today. It's a good place to sort of start much of the discussion of if that's the depressing landscape. I guess the advice and experience that we can help provide attendees here on how to make things better and have an impact on business.
Well, thank you, Gunter. I appreciate your insight and Devo's providing this information and these statistics. It is disheartening. I mean, because we do have serious threats out here, and we've got to keep the best and brightest engaged in all of our operational divisions, and SOC is no different. So the first question for all of you is, what do you consider the major drivers for performance in your SOCs? We'll start with, in fact, why don't you start by telling us your name, and what you do, and what agency you work for? And we'll start with Jennifer.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Saunders. I am the branch chief for the Computer Security Incident Response Center for HHS. We are based out of Atlanta, Georgia. I have been working there for the past 9 years as a Security Operations Center manager. I have been doing security for the past almost 20 years now. I did 6 years in the U.S. Army, teaching the soldiers at the advanced training how to become cybersecurity professionals. And after I got out the Army, I went overseas and spent 6 years over there in Kuwait and Afghanistan, working with the Southwest Asia Cyber Center, where it was a cross-functional group of different organizations and team monitoring, managing, and protecting our soldiers over there in the Middle East. For me, what are the major drivers for performance in our SOC? Well, one of the primary ones for us is just our ability to thoroughly document our SOC operations, not just from an internal standpoint, but also being able to document how we, the SOC, work with all the other cross-functional teams so that we can paint a true holistic picture for leadership to explain what's really going on within our networks. By creating the holistic ecosystem that we have within cybersecurity operations, we've been able to integrate not just the incident response element, but also the threat hunting, threat intelligence, the network architecture, i.e. your endpoints and stuff like that, and even our communications arm, which is a very strong point for our organization, ensuring that we are communicating, educating, providing knowledge articles, information from trusted third parties to all our trusted stakeholders within HHS. One of the biggest things for us is being able to show leadership, essentially, what services and capabilities we can provide. And based off of those services and capabilities, being able to create use cases to use that data to better protect us rather than constantly running to purchase new technology, even though that is an important part of our life cycle as far as our maturity for our Security Operations Center.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jennifer. We appreciate your insight. Next, we'll go to Mr. Dan LaGraff.
All right, I've effectively operated my mute button, so off to a good start. So I'm Dan LaGraff. I'm the Deputy CISO at the Energy Department. I've been there a little while now. Previous to this role, I was the Director of Cybersecurity Operations, so kind of more directly involved in the SOC in that role. So, you know, I'm familiar with the topic. You know, I believe the question was, you know, what kind of drives SOC performance?
Yes.
And for me, you know, if I had to pick a quick answer, it would be people, and I just kind of say that because a lot of times we, as technologists, we forget about people. And despite what some, you know, technologies or vendors may tell you, like, you know, there's precious few technologies that are really people free. It takes people to tune them and to engineer them and to set them up. And you know, what I've kind of found as far as, you know, the difference between lesser and greater performing SOCs or improvement of your own SOC is the biggest bang for buck is having the right skilled people in the right positions. And it's actually a pretty significant challenge given that, relatively speaking, our industry is young. And so in my opinion, we've sort of hoovered up into the industry a whole bunch of people, and some of them are more or less qualified, and the really expert ones are a hot commodity. And so you know, as far as, you know, people always talk in terms of people, process, technology, I really feel like people are the driver kind of in performance in a SOC. But anyways, that's all on that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. That is a key component, because without the people, you know, where would they be and where would we be? Colonel Rockhill.
All right, I'm following Dan's lead with the mute button success, I hope. Thanks for doing that. Listen, it's hard going after those two folks, because Jen and Dan know what they're doing. I'm going to pile on a little bit and say I think ultimately for me, and I'm going to get back to myself in a second, but ultimately for me, what this is about is risk. And that seems intuitive. Where I think we struggle sometimes is a variation between what you might call or consider risky in an IT business or in a cybersecurity business, but what is really relevant risk to the business. In my business, in this uniform that many of you all supported, I appreciate that. It's risk to mission. We have a moniker called risk to mission, risk to force. So I'm trying to align, our SOC operations in a way that's best calibrated for what is the relevant risk. What is the relevant risk to the mission right now? Okay, so analogy I give sometimes is if we've not properly, detected, or hopefully we have detected, or maybe we've been slow to respond, which the stats bear out well from Gunter's presentation. Of something like library terrain on an installation. When we call installations, we mean Air Force bases or the like. And if a library has been at risk and we haven't responded to cover that segment of terrain, and what I mean by library is literally like a public library, which we offer to to various airmen in uniform. I can accept that risk. What I can't accept for a period of time, as long as there's no lateral movement, is risk to, say, fighter jets heading east to make sure North Korea is not acting up. And I don't mean to take it to that sort of, sort of ethereal place, but for us, that's risk to mission. So I've got to be able to calibrate and drive the SOC to make sure they can reduce risk, not remove risk. And that would be my second point is sometimes I think we chase the removal of risk, the zeroing out of risk, and that's not real. But it's okay to tell leaders that, because most leaders are born to make decisions or been sort of developed to make decisions within the bounds of risk, whether that be, business development or whatever it might be. So that's what we're trying to drive. But the answer said before by Jennifer and Dan are perfect. I'm sort of just bolting on. With that, one segue to me, I didn't forget Joyce's. So almost 30 years in the service, I am in a sense one of the deputy directors for security operations for the Air Force. It's not that simple in our structure, but I don't want to hog all the time, codifying that. For a substantial portion of our infrastructure, that's essentially the role I hold. I also hold some other hats that Uncle Sam makes sure I don't get paid well for, but that's okay. That's okay. Please take that as everyone. I'm grateful for taxpayers. Please take that.
Thank you so much. So, Jen, let me ask you this question, and Gunter, you feel free to pop in. Are mean times the best measure of SOC effectiveness?
Oh, this is such a great question, isn't it? I'm sure everyone in the audience that saw the MTTR is like, oh. So we have that MTTX, right? The formula, whether we're talking about detection, alerting, response, recovery, or even remediation, if appropriate. It's a good metric. I think it's a dated metric that's more focused on speed as it is quality. And that's kind of hard to navigate in our industry. You may have on one end, from an operational standpoint, the quality assurance of the alerts and of the data that you're investigating. It's extremely important. So that's going to take some time to do these investigations, to write these use cases up, to provide that information to leadership, versus on the other hand, we have on the speed side, how quickly did we respond to this? Did we handle it, the MTTR piece? And it's just like, like speed is cool, but speed isn't cool if everything that you're getting, the data that you're getting from that speed is trash, right? If the analysts are sitting there wasting their time looking at these low-level alerts or just alerts that they're inundated with, instead of actually having some form of automation that can sift through all that noise to give them something to really focus on and have some real quality investigations. I think we need to, as leaders in the industry, put more focus on that, and not just necessarily the speed attribute of, hey, let's throw up these quick dog and pony type metrics, right? To appease whoever, right? We have different stakeholders, different levels of leadership and stuff like that. But I don't think it's the only available metric that you can use within a security operations center. We could possibly look at what's the realized value in some of these metrics, right? So when we're looking at traffic, the analysts are parsing through, like, how much of that traffic is truly visible, right? How much of that traffic are we really seeing? If you don't have SSL inspection or something like that set up within your organization, then you can assume that there's a lot of traffic that you're not seeing, right? So from a confidence level, from a confidence business level or agency level, I would say that that's a very low confidence that a business should have within a security operations center if 80% of the traffic that they're going through, they can't do anything with it, right? Because there's no SSL inspection. So I think there are ways that you can capture more actionable metrics that are going to drive change within your programs or within your organization, instead of these metrics that essentially are just really quick, pretty metrics to throw up on a screen to appease, X, Y, and Z.
Okay, great.
Well,
Gunter.
I definitely agree with Jennifer on the sort of the meaningfulness and the meaninglessness of those numbers, and I think we're in a transition period, right? And we're going to have to learn and invent new ways of dealing with this. In particular, I'm very much of the sense of there's things like alert fatigue and the way that maybe an over pivot to satisfy those metrics of dealing with all the easy stuff first. Right, and to deal with those 10,000 alerts or whatever about failed logins, right? And sort of churning through that, versus the more complex sort of things of being able to understand that there is a insider threat operating in these parts. And if you were to look at those pure metrics, then I can increase my stats, my mean time to response for all those failed logins, but boy, is my MTTR going to suck for for that insider threat investigation, right? And so that bears to me, advice really is automate as much as you possibly can at that lowest level, right? If you're worried about those stats, then fantastic. Your stats will look fantastic with that automation, but I don't think it's really tracking the business here. I think that's it's very much. I use the analogy that the threats are developing so fast, our adversaries are innovating at a fast pace of new technologies and automating their attacks. That's in many ways, if you're still relying on the human beings in those SOC teams to churn away and to operate, you now have a human speed bump in your response, right? And I think it's taking a different way of doing that. So I very much like Jennifer's perspective of, maybe better metrics of, how much of my attack surface do I actually have visibility of, right? And another one is to leverage things like the MITRE ATT&CK framework and understand to say, if for this installation I care about insider threats, then these are the types of detections that I need to have action. These types of detections and alerts that I need to be able to generate. And if those are the types of things that I need to generate, then I need to know what data sources and data inputs that I have to have. And so having that visibility of what, if you like, that visibility of my visibility across the organization feels like a sound metric, certainly for now and for the next few years.
Thank you very much. Interesting. I want to pull on that thread a little bit. I'm going to direct this particular question to Colonel Rockhill, but I want you all to think about, what seems to be the barriers to automation? Is it that people don't know how to spell AI? I mean, so because I read in a recent article that if we don't step it up, we are going to be in about less than 10 years so far behind most of our adversaries. So I want you to have that thought in your mind as I go to Colonel Rockhill. What do you think the barriers and alignment and accountability in SOCs are, and what can leadership do to overcome these challenges? And some of that is related to what I just said.
Yeah, hey, Joyce, I really appreciate that. And I look forward to questions further on, because I think this is a collective we, not just us here, that they get a chance to talk to everybody today. But for us, and I'm going to speak through it from the lens of what I understand, which is, the uniform I'm wearing and the institution I'm in, some barriers to alignment, and then therefore bridging to the technology adoption for us are just what you might call business sectors inside of our institution. So the military tends to be geographically aligned, for example. So, we have folks focused on the Pacific and each Air Force, Army, Navy, et cetera. And we do the same for Africa. We do the same for Europe. We do the same for the Middle East. And these business sectors, if you will, they have their own goals and needs, and as a result of that, you sort of drive a little bit of a bifurcation. So if you try to do a hybrid model of SOCs where you have sort of nested SOCs, if you will, almost like nesting dolls, which we do a little bit of that, what you end up with is those needs start to kind of really splinter, and a larger enterprise picture. And so from that regard, when I want to lay in from a CIO perspective, representing our CIO for a second, who's got a great vision for technology adoption, Ms. Knossenberger does, it's how do you lay that in across all of those nested business sectors, and that's very difficult, and they're all on their own strategic timelines. Now, just to be clear, your military is not hyper disorganized. That's not what I'm trying to convey, and I know that can be sometimes of a meme that might be created out of that. Not at all, but I'm just talking about the challenge for SOC integration. And so then within inside of that, if I go, okay, this is a common investment. If you're the Secretary of the Air Force, who just briefed at a large National Transportation Association recently about the threats from cyber, which, hey, for this professional group, I was like, yes, preach. We need that. But you're trying to solve it from an enterprise level. What I know down a notch is that, okay, how do I get to some machine learning to automate, a lot of that kind of non-gray matter work, non-human work as fast as possible, where I've got to, is it small wins? Do I inject, some technology from said sponsor today or others, in some of those sectors and then piece it together, or do I lay in a vision from on top? And I got to be honest with you, that's a hard problem. And I think it's dependent on the organization. I will tell you what we're trying to do is more the, sort of build it and it will come. So we're picking spots inside of our mission sector. So for example, right now in our admin gents, or we call it admin gents, or kind of our business networks, we're trying to inject some more automation there with modernized Siemens sort technology and spinning our technicians there. And then we're meanwhile assessing operational technology, say the F-35 program, which is a large fighter jet program, to see where those two things converge, right? The last point on this is obviously, and this is not lost on anyone here, is I can't wait to do that convergence. So what I'm thinking about is how do I ingest the data from, say, that operational technology now to spin it through some system somewhere in a dev environment, a lab environment, so that when it comes time to field, I'm not waiting 2 to 4 years, to kind of see the reap the fruits of those. And we got to do that sort of in parallel. That's one way that we're trying to approach it. I'll return back to my teammates. Thanks.
Okay. Hey, interesting that you should say that. I'm going to, Jen, you have a federated, I know what it's like, being the deputy CIO for policy and planning, okay, with a federated organization of 27 agencies, mission areas, and staff offices. Going along with what Rocky was saying, how do you work with a federated organization and herd the cats and get the coalition of the willing?
Well, I mean, being in a federalized environment, as most of you know, like there are going to be its challenges. I think one of the barriers to alignment and accountabilities for federal SOCs is providing them with the authority to do their job. When you look within an agency and there's federalization within an agency itself, it can become hard when it comes to creating a true enterprise environment, because when you have all these different departments essentially not cut off, there's definitely information sharing, there is definitely relationship building and collaboration that's taking place, but just naturally with the federalization model, sometimes the visibility isn't there. Just depending on what it is that we're trying to look at. That's an ongoing thing that we're constantly working with, constantly building relationships, constantly having discussions in regards to what sorts of logs or what sorts of data are we missing from our particular stakeholders that we can integrate into our current feeds that are going to assist us with these current investigations. So we're seeing a lot of great network logs, but what about the host type logs? How are we doing those correlations where we're bringing together the host level data, the network level data, and being able to create a true network operations security type picture? That gets kind of tricky when you're federalized. We've just used communication, great teamwork, and relationship building as one of some of our strong suites with communicating with our stakeholders are what our intents are. Quite honestly, at the end of the day, I think all of our goal is to protect and defend, protect the data, protect our networks, protect our assets, protect our resources, all of that. I think that's overall what our goal should be. So I think we're moving in that direction, but definitely one of the biggest hurdles from my perspective, being in the federal government, and also coming from the Department of Defense side as a soldier and as a contractor, I do think that the federalization piece does create some issues when it comes to creating a true enterprise SOC environment.
Great. Thank you so much. Dan, we're not leaving you out. Regarding information overload and timely remediation, what do you think about the tools and the information availability? Is it a chicken and egg situation? Does having more information lead to additional tools or vice versa?
Good question. First, what I learned from kind of working in this field in the federal government is, you show up at a federal civilian agency and you say, wow, this place is a federated mess. And you think like, we're unique, man, we're a specific kind of federated mess here at agency XYZ. And then you start to talk to other people and you realize, oh, wait a second, that's federal civilian structure, really. They're so hyper federated and and it's not so different from the DoD. DoD has a level of sort of federation, to my understanding as well. So it's a challenge kind of across, I would say, the federal government writ large. And kind of we joke in the civilian government, Colonel Rockhill, that C2 for us means convince and cajole, because we can't tell anybody to do anything. So we kind of have to bring along coalitions of the will, and kind of like the Colonel was talking about, how he kind of is demonstrating value and capability, and then sort of folks will pick up on it and get on board, as opposed to being able to kind of dictate what we're going to do. But to actually answer the direct question Joyce had, and it's a non-technical answer, but when you talk about getting information into a SOC and kind of alert overload and information overload, it kind of indicates to me that someone hasn't done their homework up front, or someone isn't doing the continuous homework of kind of tuning tools and kind of evaluating information that they're ingesting. I feel like there was a bit of, everybody got kind of big googly eyes when big data became popular a few years back. And so they just figured big data means just taking all the data no matter what. And I think a lot of us realized, well, that ain't cheap, number one. And so we better have a business case for why we're bringing in data, and it better clearly serve a purpose. And so we're trying to do a lot better job of kind of validating tools when we deploy them, and kind of getting buy-in from the enterprise as far as, hey, we're going to deploy this tool. Here's the business case. Here's the kind of alerts and insight we hope to gain. Similarly to ingesting CITE's data, we're a high-level SOC. There's site-level SOCs that have a lot more kind of host-based data. To Jennifer's point, we don't necessarily need to turn on the fire hose of data from every site. That won't get us anything at the headquarters necessarily. Similarly with kind of putting indicators and alerts in place, you should constantly, it's your job as kind of a SOC leader or manager or whatever, director, whatever you'd want to call it, to kind of, or analyst, to kind of make sure that those tools and data feeds are tuned so that the alerts and information you're getting is appropriate and appropriately prioritized and kind of realistic, because that's one quick way to sort of sink a SOC, essentially, is to just have all kinds of garbage data and alerts coming in that bury the important stuff, and then it's kind of like, what's the point? So to make a clear answer, Joyce, I think there's an element of governance and business case that people don't, that particularly technical people don't think of a lot of times when thinking about a SOC. And I think there's a kind of element of life cycle and continuous evaluation regarding what you have sort of deployed and implemented.
And over at Department of Energy, you all are a little bit unique in the fact that you have all the national labs as well. So it's not a simple thing for Department of Energy.
That's right. Yeah. When you have all the national labs, basically what that means is all of the people that are subordinate organizationally are smarter than you. So it's like, it just blows my mind how kind of brilliant some of these folks are at the labs. So we're very fortunate to work with them. I think really we have great capability there. But yes, it does kind of complicate things a little.
Yeah. So Let's all discuss the pressures on SOC teams regarding evolving attack surfaces and tools, um, like the threat actor behavior. There's a lot of emphasis and a lot of focus now on behavioral analytics. Whoever wants to answer that question, everybody can jump in if they want to. Let's talk about that for a little bit.
Well, I'll go. Well, one at Security Operations Center, right, 24/7, 365. With the increased data loss activity, the media attention, the frequency of different attacks. Of course, there are all industries and businesses that have to make cybersecurity resilient and make it a top priority. And there's so many organizations that leave themselves open to different attacks, from ransomware attacks, phishing attacks, you know what I'm saying, misconfigurations with deployments and things of that sort. Taking all those things into account, it's a lot of pressure on Security Operations Center to get things fixed quick. You know, fast. They want to know what's going on with this particular incident, or with this particular event, or with this activity that was going on. And sometimes the pressure on just speed, just to go back to what I said earlier on, I think sometimes that gives analysts a messed up mindset as it pertains to the alerts and what they're looking at. More of, you know what, I'm going to stick to looking at these really simple alerts because I know what I'm going to get, the outcome that I'm going to get from looking at this alert. I know the kind of investigation I'm going to lead. I know the kind of ticket. I've done this before. I'm comfortable with this, rather than it being more of an analyst being able, with automation and machine learning, have a subset of traffic that they can really take their time with and create these investigations. I think with security operations, it's just a need for speed all the time. And it's not just speed in investigations, it's speed in everything. Speed in communication time, speed in everything. How quickly do you communicate this information to your stakeholders? How quickly did you find out this? How quickly did we react to the information that was received from a trusted third-party entity? There's a lot of pressure points, and I think as leaders, we absolutely keep those in mind, but we're just driving the message to our analysts that quality over quantity in the QA/QC process is what we're looking for, rather than just looking at alerts and submitting as many tickets as you can. That's how we miss things. You know, just getting very complacent with what we're used to, instead of really taking the time and tuning our environment.
Yeah.
Well,
go ahead, Gunther.
So I think I'm sort of add a couple of things there. So I think one of the things that Dan mentioned earlier on, I think is really important, and that is about the people that are involved in this, right? And you know, while I'll keep on stressing, you know, the automation that sort of goes around there, it's really about enabling those people to grow and to do their work and the things that matter. And I think we're at a lucky time now. I think you know, Forrester had this trough of despair type of thing about technologies and how these things sort of change, and AI and machine learning are fundamentally changing, you know, from what they were into the practical reality. And I sort of look at this in a couple of ways, you know, from a behavioral analytics perspective, and that is, you know, we're now in the midst of, I think the best way of sort of thinking of this is using that security technology and the security platforms to better enable those human beings in the SOC teams to do their things, right? And so in one way it is the, you know, how do we, you know, provide those analysts with that Iron Man suit, right? So that gives them all the superpowers needed to elevate and to operate at that tier 3 level. You know, I can work on anything and all the new platforms. With that, you know, to stretch that metaphor a little bit, that Jarvis in the background providing that real-time advice on, you know, have you thought about this? You know, and let me take care of that thing for you, and to sort of focus on that part. So I think that is a key part there for, you know, to enable those SOC teams, you know, and to really focus on what matters. The other part, and particularly for the behavioral analytics side, is that the technologies themselves are fundamentally changing in that the gap between detecting something and moving from, if you like, data information to intelligence, that process has evolved very, very fast, right? And many teams are still focused on data analytics, not intelligent analytics, right? But the other side of this coin really is that fusion now of investigation into automated and dynamic response. And so I think one of the things that you'll see and hear a lot more of, in particular from the major OS vendors and cloud providers, this thing called conditional controls, the ability to understand that a user is logged in at 5 different places, there's 100 different processes running throughout the organization, but it's only their credentials on one system over in the left-hand corner over here that's being attacked by a bad guy and is being compromised. And so how do I control the security and limit that exposure over there while enabling that user and that business system to keep on working while I deal with the threat over there, as opposed to a blanket response that stops that user, that operation from running. And so I think that fusion is going on now, and those behavioral analytics pieces are the critical ingredient that is still rapidly maturing, but I think an areas for SOC teams and SOC leaders to start diving deep into those technologies and making use of the platforms that they already have available to achieve the desired results.
And I'm going to remark on a couple of things. Number one is just like Colonel Rockhill and Jen and was talking about, some of the pressure on speed has to do with those of us constituents who find out about something and then go running up to Constitution Avenue to those two houses on the hill and complain. And demand that they do something, and so they haul all the technology people before them and ask questions, and next thing you know there's a couple of laws coming out or a couple of recommendations coming out that we hadn't intended on or prepared for. The second is the new and developing area. I like what you said, Gunter, about information versus intelligence. So what are the strategic differences between the two, and which one would you rather have? The information or the intelligence. So let's, going back to what Dan said earlier, the people. Let's talk about the pros and cons of developing employees versus hiring skilled workers. Whoever wants to start.
Hey, Joyce and teammates, I'll jump in here. I think, this is tough, but it really weaves a nice thread that Dan probably started with the people reference earlier. And for us, and I think it's shared by all, the complexity demands some semblance of internal understanding. I don't know that the days are here anymore where you can just throw sort of technicians at it. Now, we've all understood it was never like the movies, right? Bing Ramsey's pretty good in Mission Impossible, but he ain't that good. But the reality is, like, I need people, when I get back to risk and sort of relevant risk and mitigation of relevant risk, to me, it's sort of mean time to mitigate, not necessarily resolve or respond. I need folks who understand the complexity of the operation, because the tools are increasingly operating at a level that pushes humans in much more complex space. And I think it moves it, and I'm kind of connecting this back to people. It moves the operation of a SOC across all departments of an organization. And I don't know that that's ever happened. And I mean by in the moment, not like, hey, the phones are down, right? In this sector, or hey, by the way, 50 years ago, I can't quite get the mail out as fast as I want, or this is different. And you're an integrated entity now. You almost have the SOC almost in a way has a foot in the C-suite, if you will, using a commercial model, right? Because what's happening on the network is about risk.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, I need people who understand and using the C-suite, phrasing or the leadership phrasing, what they're thinking about every day. And I think to do that, it's hard to transport a lot of people in. Now, I'm speaking from a bias of a very large institution. I understand that, and it may be different for smaller institutions. But for us, I need to grow them from within heavily so they can understand and translate. It's not just about PCAP data and net flow data and what looks like risk over here. It's about what's the relevant mission risk, in that particular sector. But I'll offer that when you do that, a struggle we have is, of course, retention. Everybody has that.
Mhm.
And the other part is that sometimes you start to get a little bit myopic, right? You're keep building twins of yourself. And then I come to panels like this and my mind's blown by all these external thoughts that I should be doing a lot better job incorporating, right? So how do I bring in just enough people, right?
Yeah.
To help
Yeah.
us there. And then the last thing from a federal perspective is writing contracts to do that is obviously not easy. So it's fraught with peril and that's difficult, right? And you just want to be just do SOC stuff, and you're like, well, you didn't put that you wanted me to do detection and for forensic, and you're like, come on. And I'm obviously grossly overstating, but all right. So those are my thoughts. I think it's heavily in, but some from without. I'll pause there.
Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in on the workforce?
I agree with Colonel Rockhill, exactly what he's saying. I mean, it is complex, and it's going to be specific to your organization. Some organizations may have the ability to take time to do internal training and essentially building of a particular skill set that they're trying to build upon, and some organizations do not. And also for an organization to be able to really look at what they're doing and be able to decide, should this be something that we have a third party do this particular, when we think about risk, I mean, we also have to think about the people, right? If the skill sets are not there within whatever, security operations, engineering, intelligence, if the skill sets are not there, we got to build the people up. So we have to be able to provide, some form of internal training, but also make good business decisions. Just looking at our situation and saying, you know what, it probably would make more sense from a risk, just purely using a use case of risk. From a risk standpoint, this particular skill set that we need, we don't have, and that opens us up to X, Y, and Z. So from a risk standpoint, sometimes you don't have the ability to train from within, and you have to take steps in contracting that work out or bring in some sort of trusted third party to do that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to. I've done that twice now. But I sort of agree. But then I think there is another option on the table. And I think if I take a different area outside of SOC and reapply that is, it used to be the time that if I wanted to do penetration testing, right, I had to have an internal team because I didn't trust anyone else, right? And then sort of evolved that here are my trusted providers that I've personally vetted, and have all these, reams of legal criteria there. And then evolved into, well, here is a government standard, and as long as they've been certified against that, then that's okay. And a few other steps to where we are now, where we talk about bug bounties, where a global community is now contributing and sort of growing in that space. And I think we should take leaves out of that book for SOC in two reasons. One is that attack surface just keeps on expanding, and if it was just about how do I control shadow IT and all these other things, we would have dealt with it 20 years ago, right? So this is the norm now, right? And the other part is access to those systems that we have are incredibly sophisticated, and so highly specialized, highly sophisticated. We would all be in training 24/7 to be able to understand and deal with these parts there, and so I do envisage and the late requirement to figure out how to tap that community of experts. And in one hand, it's the concept of almost that phone a friend, the ability to tap instantly that deep expertise and say, here is a very well-defined mission that I need you to focus on for incident response, investigation, and go handle that. And I think we need to, as a community, develop that skill base, and the tooling around to enable, the easy interaction, and the controls to tap that expertise, on demand. And that to me is pretty exciting. It may feel pushing the limits a little today, But having weathered through the pen testing world to pen test to bug bounties now, and the biggest bug bounty is being run by the U.S. Air Force, right? I think that's fantastic transition, and it has had it's made security better, and I think we're on the path again.
Great. I believe when we look at this, this has been done sort of kind of way back in the early days when I got started in technology, where we always had these hybrid teams, and in fact, what Jack Welch used to call it, just in time. So you had the appropriate workers, whether they were internal or external, and you had these multi-dimensional teams that were put together and working on a specific problem at a specific time. Would that work today, the Jack Welch methodology? I think we call it agile today, but that's okay. We'll it's, so do you think that would work today?
Hey, Joyce, I'll pile on. I'll be brief. I agree. Yes, and one thing I think I probably misconveyed, but I appreciate, Gunter, you're right on. We do have a great bug bounty program, and I think I locked in on the verb hiring instead of the verb sort of acquiring or adding or bolting or whatever it might be. Bolting on. Building an internal workforce, stated my thoughts, but I think absolutely the partnership, Joyce, and the whole team. I agree with what Gunter was conveying. I won't name vendors, but some of the best kind of alternative courses of action that we saw during what happened with SolarWinds, several months ago, and still kind of in some regards ongoing, has been with partnerships across the entire commercial sector, not just internally. And we do have the benefit of national security intelligence and the whole thing, but the perspectives are profound and they're very helpful. And I think Dan kind of suggested his partnerships with the labs, where on one hand he probably gets a lot of air quote help, for how to do business better. On the other hand, you do get a lot of help, right? And there's these great perspectives that come. And I think absolutely, Joyce. I think the hybrid model way, and I think it's really the only way. The terrain is flat. I usually hold up a phone whenever I'm with folks who aren't quite as deep in the cybersecurity arena and go, hey, from a military perspective, and I don't mean to be kind of exponentially risky here, but the fight is here, right? It's on your phone. I can't wear my uniform and go get it over there anymore. It's here. So the partnerships from that perspective have to be flat, like we all have to. So yes, I think hybrid model is the way to go. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Great. We're almost to time, so I'm going to lob the last question, and I'm looking for everybody to contribute. If you were going to discuss SOC operation priorities with your leadership, what points would you make? What do you think, or how would you address that to your specific leadership? And we'll start with Dan.
Oh, bonus. Let's see. I guess I would, we kind of harp a lot on operational visibility from a SOC perspective where we are, particularly given the federated nature, so we would kind of, I guess I would reiterate that I can't defend what I can't see. And so I need to be able to, people think you show up at a place and it's like, yeah, just give me the network map. I mean, has anyone worked at a place where there's a quote network map? There's not. So, I can't defend what I can't see, and operational visibility is key, and we need to improve upon that constantly. But secondly, to Colonel Rockwell's point earlier, all of us, whether we like it or not, we're in the business of risk management, and so everything we do, even technical SOC operations things, need to be through the lens of risk management. So, we need to be willing to accept risk and where appropriate, and not where not appropriate. And I think that's a key point because it'll drive some of the kind of investment decisions and operations decisions, even at the SOC level, when seen through that lens. And I will say one more thing, and then I'll stop, which is to say, I don't feel that the federal government are particularly good risk managers because we are way risk averse. I think if we look to business is a kind of place that they know how to take risk, and so they do when it's appropriate. Risk management doesn't mean don't take any risk. So I feel like the federal government needs to kind of take, we hear a lot about risk management, but I'm not seeing a lot of taking risks in risk management to kind of do it appropriately, and that ties to the SOC operations piece, in my opinion. That's it.
Yeah, all of the recommendations to fail fast? Nah, not in the federal government. Failure is not an option.
At
So,
all.
Jen,
Let's see, because my boss is watching right now.
yeah, what would you recommend?
You know what? I think really, and I think a lot of us can agree with this. Just continue to have trust and confidence in your resources in terms of people. Continue to put into them, educate, provide training, and just from my level as a security operations center manager, to communicate things with director level or executive level leadership. Help me communicate exactly what's going on operationally. I think a lot of times we get caught up in the what looks good, right, on dashboards and things like that. But when we look at things realistically from an ops level, from the folks on the floor, there's some other things that we probably need to be paying attention to and making sure that leadership is fully aware of in order to be able to make a good risk decision, right? Leadership can only make decisions based on the information that they have. So it can lead a false sense of confidence that leadership has within their security operations center, within their security program, if they think that everything seems fine because everything's quiet, but that's not really the case. Just continue to put your trust and resources in terms of training into your people.
Okay, Colonel Rockhill.
Hey, Joyce, thank you. It's hard to follow those good answers. I'll just tell you, I'm a big, sorry if I sponsor Hamilton on accident, but family's big. I got daughters, theater performers, and love the show Hamilton and watched it in person. And your SOC operators, your cybersecurity professionals, your CISO needs to be in the room when it happens, or the room where it happens, right? Yeah, I mean, so just put us in the room where it happens. And for the Air Force, I'll make that more tangible. We have a great CIO, we have great leadership who's really, I've already spoken about the Secretary of the Air Force, but I don't know historically that we've done a good job. We used to talk about communications versus cybersecurity, and we used to talk about in the formation of what we call PACE planning. Some are familiar with that in various certifications, but primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency, your 4 layers of how you sustain communications on a battlefield. That doesn't work with cybersecurity because it's not just about sustaining communications, it's about integrating defenses and response to fight through and mitigate risk. And I can't guarantee zero sum on risk. So put me in the room where it happens when you're planning things, whether you're building things or planning operations. And then the professionals will make sure they voice the right perspectives. Yes, they will come in overzealous. Yes, they will not always understand that you can accept more risk than you're offering, to Dan's great point. But I think over time, they'll calibrate themselves, right, to best value. And so put us in the room where it happens. I think we'll represent well. That's what I'd offer.
Great. And we'll give you the final word, Gunter.
Thank you. No, I think, my approach on here, advice is spend time on partnerships, right? You have to find those colleagues, and it has to be more than colleagues, it has to be partners across the business, across the organizations. Increase that visibility. This isn't just about data visibility from data lake and that, but full visibility in how you operate, how you assess a risk, and seek their input. And the last part I'd extend on that on the partnership is that partnership with those vendors. So the money that you pay for that product, and that is only a small piece of the value that you can get out of it. Sitting behind that product are the engineering teams, the PM teams, their professional services teams, their expertise in a particular slice of security. They're all as equal professional as the SOC teams that you're running, right? And they will engage and they will support in that way. So leverage those partners, and tap that expertise and grow from there.
Great. Well, thank you all so very much. This is a very interesting topic, and I hope all of the people who joined today got all of the objectives of identifying critical drivers, recognizing the value of strategic alignment, differentiating between high and low performing SOCs, and most important of all, the people. Don't forget about the people. Gunter Ullman, Jennifer Saunders, Dan LeGraff, Joshua Rockhill, thank you so much for joining us and being a part of this optimizing SOC operations. And thank you so much to Devo for being our corporate sponsor and our technology partner. Have a great day and live long and prosper.
Thanks, everyone. Go Army.
Thank you.
Air Force. Go Air Force. See ya.